If you could tell me your name and explain where we are.
Terry Carr, and we're in Yellowwood State Forest.
How long have you been researching?
Serious researching, maybe 5 years. But I had my first experience as a kid, and that's what got me into it. So I don't know if you want to hear about that or not.
Yeah.
So as a kid, I probably was maybe 12, and I was with a good friend. They lived on a horse farm, so they had a lot of property. And we were just playing like boys do out in it was wintertime, and we were down by the creek. It was frozen, playing on the ice. And from there, it had a hill that went up. And so we were just walking back to go to his house, and we heard a loud crash behind us. And we looked back up on the hill, and they had a wire fence that something pushed down as it came over. That's what caught our attention. And at first we thought it was just a person walking, but he was really tall and covered in a dark fur. And we thought it was odd the way he was moving too. So, and I don't know why, but we screamed Bigfoot, and we didn't really know what Bigfoot was at that time. And so we decided we're gonna go back in the woods and follow it. And we find big barefoot tracks. And we're like, no, why would anybody be walking barefoot in the snow? So we follow it into the next section of woods. Now this is where it gets bizarre. All of a sudden we find piles of rocks about like this, stacked in pyramids, maybe 6 piles. And we're like, what is this? And we started uncovering them, and there's dead cats under them. So it was storing food, whatever this was. And at that point we left. We were not gonna go back. So just recently I went back to that farm, and I talked to the landowners, and I said, I wonder, have you ever had any weird things happen on their property? And at the time the son was like, no, but maybe Dad might know. He goes, well, let me go get Dad. So Dad comes out, I introduce myself, tell him my experience as a kid. And he goes, you know, and he's talking to his son, your sister won't ever go back there in the woods anymore, because she used to have bonfire parties, and she would talk about seeing shadow people behind the trees. And I was like, oh, they're still here after all those years. So I thought that was really cool that they were still habitating in that area. But I mean, I've always been interested since I was a kid.
Whereabouts is that again?
That's in Danville.
Danville.
So a strange thing about that is, if you're not familiar with our cities, but my friend who lives near Amo, which is about 10 miles from Danville, he's had Bigfoots on his property for a long time. His kids have all seen him, like a family group. And that's not far from Danville. So I started putting the puzzles together. Danville, where he lives, and my other hot spots in a park, which is another 30 miles from there. But maybe they're all related. Maybe it's the same clan, and they circulate from spot to spot. So I thought, what's the odds of that not being tied together? Because I don't know how many Bigfoot there are, but you know, the fact that I can draw a line of A, B, and C where there's Bigfoot activity.
What counties?
That would be Putnam County. Danville's Hendricks County. And those are side-by-side counties.
Is there anything distinctive about that region?
Not really. Farms, large patches of woods, and my hot spot is in a nature preserve of all places. So at the time it wasn't really well known at this place, and unfortunately the DNR kind of started promoting this park, so now it gets a lot of traffic, and it seems like the Bigfoot activity has died down. So, but you know, there's been a lot of activity in that area. Morgan Monroe is probably, I think it's the bigger hotspot than this place, but Ed says this was #1, but we have a lot of activity in Morgan Monroe.
And that's a state forest?
Yes. I get the chills when something's happening, and that tells me I better be paying attention. So if I'm somewhere and we get chills, then I know there's something either watching me or very close by. A lot of times when I get the chills, all of a sudden there'll be a tree knock, or something will happen that, it's kind of funny because my hot spot out in Putnam County, I brought a friend who was in town from New Jersey. He went for sure about Bigfoot, so I took him out here, and we're down by the creek, and this about 14-foot branch comes flying out in the middle of nowhere and lands, and he thought I did it, and I'm like, why would I throw a branch? And he goes, that's not even from the same type of tree. He's like, they're different trees. Where'd it come from? I said, I told you, that this area is a hot spot. So we were leaving, we were on our way out, and he stops and he uttered some words. He goes, what the is that? And he saw these big yellow eyes looking at us from the brush. And he's like, I thought you were full of, and you're not, that's real. And I said, well, I'm not gonna lie to you. What I got to gain by lying? So.
And that was in, where's
that was in Putnam County.
Putnam County, okay.
Yeah. It's opened my eyes to, if this can happen, what else can happen? Because I've had so many weird things happen that there's no way to explain it. Like we were leaving this one hot spot, and all of a sudden, I swear, it sounded like something 500 pounds was sitting on top of my car, moving around. I felt the buckling of my metal on top of the car, and I said, there's something on top of the car. And we pulled over and stopped. Nothing, no dents, perfect, like nothing had ever been up there, but it sounded like there was like a bear up there. And I can't prove there was something cloaked, but we've seen things cloaked before. We had something fall out of a tree, out the corner of my peripheral. I see it hit the ground. I'm expecting to see a cat or a raccoon go running. My buddy's standing somewhere different. We see the exact same thing, but once it hit the ground, it was invisible. It was like gone. And that was right by a tree structure. So we don't know what that was. We were just recently in Morgan Monroe, and we were putting our trail cameras up, and I just came back to the vehicle, and maybe, I don't know, 75 feet in the woods, you hear this huge tree being crushed. And I mean, it scared the out of you. If you've ever heard a tree be crushed, it was loud. And it was like, oh, I think we disturbed one. So it was pretty scary. Those are the things that scare me, is when you have interactions. We also had where we were sitting in his Jeep doing some calls at Morgan Monroe, a place called Hatfield Ridge. It's very, very hot spot. And we were doing normal stupid stuff like whoops and stuff, and then we heard one down at the lake, which is about a mile walk. So we thought, oh, we got activity. So we're goofing off, we're sitting there. I get out because he thinks he hears something behind the vehicle, so I get out. I said, I ain't getting out until you turn on your spotlight so I can see. I ain't getting out in the dark. So I get out and look, and there's nothing. As I'm getting ready to head back, there's a whoop maybe from here to this brush. That scared, I ran full speed back to the vehicle. I was terrified because that really did scare me, because that was close. I didn't want it to be that close. So.
How much of Indiana is wooded, would you guess?
Oh, I don't know.
Is it a decent portion? Is it just certain areas?
I don't know if it'd be half, but it's heavily wooded in a lot of places, especially the further south. Further you go south, the more hilly it gets. Not really mountainous, but really steep hills. So, especially this area has a lot of steep ravines up and down. A state forestry down southern part of the state. That's where my buddy talks to him, and he has one called Big Red. And so we go out. It was a night where there's no moon, no stars, it's pitch black. And he doesn't want you to use flashlights or nothing. So you walk down this trail to the gifting stump, and he talks to him like we're talking right now. And all of a sudden, I shine, I shine, I shine. There's three of them. And then this bigger one had red eyes. And I just was like, and you could watch them, they were moving like from behind trees, watching us, but they wouldn't ever get real close. And like the other ones were like an amber color. And I kept thinking, how's this possible? Because there is no animals or birds in Indiana that self-illuminate. You have to have a flashlight or headlights to illuminate. I just was baffled. I'd never seen that before. So I really feel like I'm getting close to being able to see one. I feel like it's gonna happen. Now, whether I ever go back in the woods again if I see one, I don't know. But I wanna see one.
Yeah.
How tall was the red eyes?
Oh, probably 10 to 12. He's big. That's why I call him Big Red.
And how much shorter were the amber eyes?
Maybe 6 to 8 foot tall in that ballpark, a lot shorter. But they were just like peering, you could watch them. They were like going from tree. And I kept thinking, well, a raccoon, wouldn't sway back and forth and hide and stick his head back out and keep peeking around. I had chills once again, and I was kind of almost like froze. They say a tiger has that infrasound where it can freeze its prey. That's how I felt. I felt frozen. I didn't feel threatened. Of all of my encounters, even though I've been scared, I've never felt threatened. I don't believe they're aggressive. So the one thing I will tell you that you don't do in Indiana, which we've proven, Ed has played a wounded rabbit call, and they'll throw stuff every time. Rocks, logs, they don't like that sound. It's like ringing a dinner bell and there's nothing there.
The Crossroads of America has a special place in our nation's history. Its motto, assigned in 1937, exemplifies the state of Indiana with the older intersection of U.S. Highway 40 and U.S. Highway 41 in Terre Haute. The motto has also become synonymous with its capital city of Indianapolis. Furthering its reputation as an essential crossroad, there's a major intersection of highways within the state capital: I-65, I-69, I-70, and I-74. According to the Indiana Department of Transportation, 81 billion vehicle miles were traveled on Hoosier roads in 2015 alone, plainly illustrating that many people from both in and outside of state borders are finding their way through Indiana on an annual basis, each bound for their own unknown destinations. Indiana is not only a place where historic highways intersect. It's also a place where the lives of regular people, usually minding their own business and going about their day, cross paths with the inexplicable. Indiana has a rich history of sightings of strange creatures, specifically the sort that walk upright on two legs, are covered in hair, and are generally referred to by the name Bigfoot.
My name's Jim Dodge. I live up in Anderson, Indiana. I've read about Bigfoot about my entire life. I've always been a big reader, going back to the Patterson-Gimlin film. Actual research, I'm consider myself newer to it, about 10 years now. Got interested, seriously, just by accident almost. In 2015, my son was interested in going out and Bigfooting. He'd started reading some things too. And I just, out of the blue, I come across a KBRO, Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization, and it mentioned on there that they would take you out. So I just emailed and got a response back and hooked up with Charlie Raymond one night, me and my son and Charlie, and I was hooked from then on as far as going out and learning more, serious boots on the ground stuff. That's just got hooked and I've been at it ever since. About 10 years now.
I'm Leroy Nail. I'm with the Indiana Bigfoot Research Organization. I own it and been running it over the last decade.
Debbie Sins, and I am also with the Indiana Bigfoot Research Organization. I've been doing this for about 10 years. Joined accidentally, actually. I was doing paranormal first and then kind of evolved into the Bigfoot world.
My name is Thomas Shay, founder of the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group. I got into this back in 1987, my first encounter. I was in the United States Army. I was home on leave, seeing my parents. I happened to go up to see one of my ex-girlfriends while I was in town, and on my way up along River Road, I noticed this fella, and it was like it is right now. It's warm. And I was trying to figure out why this fella was in a fur coat in all this heat. And when I got up closer to it, I was looking out the passenger window, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, it was human-like, but it was covered all in hair. So I went around and turned around and come back and actually followed it down the hill to the field and next to the river, and it turned on me and it growled. And at that time there, I knew I wasn't 6 foot tall and bulletproof at that time. But it scared me really bad. I had to, everything I seen or known stopped right there. These things ain't supposed to be real, but they are. So I've dedicated my life to finding the truth. And a lot of people know me. I won't fabricate nothing. I won't lie for you. If I catch you lying, you're off my list. But it's all science. It has to be science. It can't be going out and collecting stories. Okay, it tells us a little bit about it. But you got to go out and you got to get the data. You got to get evidence. If it's video, if it's footprints, that's my major thing, is footprints. I cast everything I see. Hair samples. I've had several hair samples that have come up. The goat stand, the Fairback goat stand. Dr. Meldrum has checked out every one of my casts. And so is Cliff. And there is no discrepancies in them. There's no hoaxing. Now, I do have some hoax that I have casted that I found to be hoax. And I've cast them and kept them. Those are the learning experiences. And every cast I get, I send to Cliff. So him and Dr. Meldrum can verify it. If it's not real, we should know.
Can you tell me a general history of the state of Indiana? It doesn't, not Bigfoot related, just in general. What do you know about the history of Indiana as a state?
Well, way back when, and I don't know the years, I'm not a history buff, but a lot of Indiana was logged out. A lot of the trees was cut down. And then they realized that they're not going to be able to farm it anyways, but they finally started letting a lot of the trees grow back. So we don't have up very many trees around here that's 100+ years old. That's one of the things about it. Most of the woods, the forest, it's not very deep. We always, all the years that I hunted, I would say, we're going in deep. Well, no, when you thought you was going in deep, you're just walking out to the other side of the road. You was walking out to the next road. So until you get down into the Hoosier National Forest or something like that, there's not a lot of deep woods.
I'm not a history buff either, but like you get down into southern Indiana, you've got French Lick, you've got West Baden, you've got all of that really interesting places. Of course, Terre Haute now has a casino, Terre Haute, Indiana. If you go to Helmsburg, there's an old broom factory. It's not in operation anymore, but I guess it was pretty cool in its day.
Indiana is a very interesting state. Its history is not unlike many Midwestern states. In some ways, there are strong resemblances to Ohio in terms of the way that the state is divided sort of culturally and the influences that remain from some of those settling groups. Of course, the history begins with the indigenous people, and believe it or not, there are many remnants of the French and Indian Wars that stretched into Indiana, and Indiana was involved. In fact, Indiana got its name from a portion of land that Virginia had originally claimed, and lots of wars and fighting went into dividing that land up, and Native people were involved with that, and ultimately it's sort of almost a placeholder name was given to the territory that's now referred to as Indiana.
The history of Indiana here, southern Indiana here, there's a lot of reports, a lot of people talk about, something living here in the southern part of the state. There's a story about at the Falls of Ohio, a group of giants was killed by the Native Americans here in the area.
Big pioneer state, big woods, a lot of Indian history, Native American history, doing a little research, I found that the first report in Indiana was in the 1830s. A lady reported a little 4-foot, she called it a 4-foot child, hairy child. I kind of didn't know if it was washing itself in the creek or what, but it was playing in the creek. But as far as organized reports, it really didn't start until the 70s with BFRO.
The history here in Indiana, like the Crosley monster, it's always been Columbus, Indiana. You got the Big Muddy. People saw that. There hasn't been nothing since. Martinsville. I've done a lot of stuff in Martinsville, especially Monrovia and Martinsville. These were on private property. I know they say Morgan Row is full of Bigfoots, but as I said, it's tainted. You got too many groups in there. So, Martinsville, Indiana, around the power plant, and there's another place called East Grove Road. There's a lot of reports in there. Like I said, we got the Marble Hill Monster here. You got, there was one here in Madison, Indiana that was saw underneath the bridge one year. I think that was in 89. At one time here, I think every 2 hours they had on the radio, what happened here, who got arrested here, and disturbances, and who called this in. And at one time in 89, I remember when I was here visiting my parents, and they would listen to the news like that. And they talked about, we just had a call that there was a sighting of a Bigfoot underneath the Madison-Milton Bridge. And that's right down here. And you got to understand that back in 89, everything closed up here. I mean, nothing was open. At 6 o'clock, this place was a ghost town. Except for your bars, you had those open. I remember I jumped in my car and run across, because I lived right across the road there in Kentucky, and come across, looked on both sides, for footprints or anything like that. There's nothing on the Kentucky side and on the Indiana side where they had kept that so nice and clean and run over. There's no tracks. I couldn't find nothing. So, but there's a lot of history here.
Could you describe this area of the state to someone who's not familiar with that?
Yeah. If you go to Bigfoot here in southern Indiana, it's going to be great because you've got a lot of hills, a lot of forestry, small towns. Being in small towns is great because right on the edge of your town, you got things living there. Everybody thinks you need to go hundreds of miles out in the middle of nowhere. They don't understand that these things are evolving. They're coming closer they're checking us out. If you go up further, you got the plain, we call it the plain part of the state, the plain states. It's all flat, cornfield, stuff like that. But you see these little outcroppings, little islands of trees out there in the fields? We did a thing one time, and we actually got one on film crossing a field. We call them islands. They island jump from these little wooded areas out in the middle of these flat areas. So if you're in a flat area and they say, well, there's no Bigfoots that can live here, they're wrong. Check them out. Check those little areas out if you can.
Oldest sighting that you're aware of in Indiana?
Goes back to the 1800s somewhere. I've got a book somewhere that we've got a whole listing of them where they go back, but I honestly forget. I believe they go clear back in the 1800s. It's not called Bigfoot, but they talk about the wild man in the woods or something like this. Because I know it goes clear back into, I think, in 1800s.
As is the case with kind of Indiana in general, which tends to get overlooked just because of where it's at. It's like the middle child almost of the Midwest states. Its Bigfoot history gets overlooked as well, but it has a rich history. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, it's no different from Ohio or Illinois in the sense that once you hit the middle state and start to head south, it's prime territory for Bigfoot sightings. There's a preponderance of state forest land. There's national forest. Hoosier National Forest is quite large. Brown County, Indiana is known for multiple state forests and beautiful landscape. And of course you have rivers and prominent rivers. The Ohio River, there's many feeders into the Ohio in southern Indiana. So you have all the natural ingredients that you need for Bigfoot reports, and you have bona fide Bigfoot reports coming out of a lot of those state forest areas. Campgrounds, road crossings, all the things that you might expect. It just, I think people don't initially associate Indiana with the Bigfoot sort of hot spots. And there really isn't one central location that's risen to prominence like a Salt Fork State Park or a Guernsey County, Ohio. Therefore, it just hasn't caught on as far as mass consciousness that's a Bigfoot state, but it does hold its share of reports that are quite interesting. I would have to imagine that you'd be looking at early 1800s in keeping with a lot of the newspaper-related accounts that were coming out as people pushed west. What they were finding initially is if they were coming through Ohio, they were running into something called the Great Black Swamp, which was horrible to try to go through. So what you would naturally do is start heading south. And south would lead them into central and southern Indiana. And so just as those reports come out of Ohio, it wouldn't take very long for similar ones to issue. There seemed to be a bump in reports, like many Midwest states in the 1970s, late 70s and early 80s. I think as it became more acceptable to talk about. Always with your Midwest states, you have cultural assumptions that tend to keep the lid on those reports because of potential ridicule. You'd want to be thought of as the town goof or whatever. And so you would keep that in-house. But with the rise of, cultural things like the Patterson-Gimlin film and the cottage industry of paperback books and shows like In Search Of, it started to become more okay to talk about what you had seen in your own backyard or along the farms of the Midwest. And I think that explains some of the reports that we start to get in the 70s and 80s. Indiana is a place where strange creatures have been sighted for quite some time. In 1953, two brothers, themselves adults and with their own families in tow, visited the Tippecanoe River for a weekend of outdoor recreation. They planned to spend their time fishing, camping, and making the most of their time by the water, but the trip would be interrupted shortly after it began. Near midday, the men heard several of the children in their group screaming. They ran to investigate, and near a group of cabins adjacent to the river found the source of the children's distress, a large creature walking on two legs, reaching up to 7 feet in height and covered in dark hair. The children were frightened to no small degree, with one of them claiming the creature had actually reached out and made physical contact with her. Others in the group claimed the beast had only one eye, seeming to indicate that they got a very up-close look at it. This sighting, reported to the Bigfoot Field Research Organization in 2004, is one of over 90 documented encounters within the state. And this, of course, does not account for sightings which go unreported. While the mid-century seems rife with Sasquatch reports in the state of Indiana, the modern era also boasts more than its fair share. One report comes from 2012, along Greenbrier Lake near Brown County State Forest. The witness and her husband were renting a cabin when one evening the man heard something breathing heavily just outside the door. The porch light had burnt out, and the man retrieved a flashlight and firearm before slowly opening the front door. The sound of breathing became louder, and both witnesses detected a strong odor they compared to a mix of old carpet and wet dog. They closed the door and waited a short time before reopening it and finding large, wet footprints left on the front porch. The intruder did not return, but the witnesses' dogs were highly agitated, remaining frantically awake throughout the night. Indiana's environment is in some ways tailor-made for a creature seeking to find food while remaining out of sight, as many assume Sasquatch generally is. Vast farmlands in northern and central Indiana provide a wealth of potential food sources. Corn and soybeans are predominant here and found in abundance. The far north is punctuated by sand dunes near Lake Michigan, while the southern portion of the state boasts hilly terrain, covered with forests and dotted with several caves, as it eventually gives way to the Ohio River along the southernmost border.
No, that's one of the things with Indiana. I think our most recent published report is like 2020, and it was just sounds. I printed off just out of curiosity for myself, went through the reports and just printed off the Site A or Class A reports, and it was roughly half of the reports that are on the public reports, but they're so old. I know there's a lot of 50s, 70s, so it's the more prominent ones, I think, were some of the older ones. It shows, I mentioned a while ago about seemed to be mobile sightings. I found one that was actually two different reports, but it was the same county up in Hamilton County, where in July of 73, it was a sighting in Sheridan, Indiana. And in September of 73 was a sighting in Westfield. And they're basically within 10 miles of each other. And at that time, everything out there was rural and country and farm and hadn't been cleaned up housing, none of that like it is now. But I found that interesting as I thought about how Bigfoot move and, what kind of amount of property it takes to support one. I found those two separate reports, but the same year, just a couple months apart.
The most recent thing, which wasn't a sighting, but an experience, I had two hunters that called me that had experience in southern Indiana. We have two major lakes that's in central and southern Indiana. We have Monroe Lake, which is in Monroe County, comes up into Brown County here, and then when you get down around French Lick in southern Indiana, there's Patoka Lake down there. That's two of the major lakes that's in, and they was fishing on Patoka Lake, and they was trolling along the edge of the bank fishing for catfish, and so they was trolling really slow along the bank. And the guy told me, he says, I've hunted my whole life. He goes, I don't know what was coming down the side of that bank making so much noise, and then when it busted up over the hill, breaking all the trees and limbs, I cannot tell you what it was, but I can tell you it wasn't anything that I'm aware of. And that's been within the last month that I got told that one. And then actually on the way here, you got told by someone that, they're my place. What did he say?
Yeah. He's got, we stopped at a gas station on our way here, and he saw our shirts, and he says, I've got him at my house. I said, I have a lake or pond. He said, pond and a couple of streams and woods, and I heard him out there clicking and doing tree knocks. I said, well, you're in a good area. They're here. He didn't expand on anything else or invite us out there. We didn't ask either, but we hear a lot of stories like that all the time, and I look at him as it's a great story, but we don't have nothing to back it up with. Right. That's why we like to go out when we get those reports. We like to go out and investigate.
And actually,
the homeowner's okay with it.
And actually be able to back the story up. But we hear a lot of stories, and that's what it's fun. If you have a shirt on and you're standing somewhere, you never know who's going to tell you what.
I can be conversation.
Yeah, I could be sitting in the parking lot and they'll come walking up in the truck and start telling me stories, and it's like that's awesome. And most of the time they don't know, they have no idea what knowledge I have, and then they'll be telling me about an area that I'm very aware of, and all they're doing is confirming. That's another report from that area.
There's in a very recent report in May of 2020 took place in the Yellowwood State Forest, which is in Brown County. And the thing that is remarkable about this one is that it factors in a hunter and his 11-year-old daughter. They were both out turkey hunting, and she was getting some of her first experience as a turkey hunter in season. And this wasn't far away from their house. In fact, if I'm remembering this case correctly, they were hunting on property that was adjacent to state forest land. They, while they were out hunting turkey, they had a remarkable daytime sighting of a 7 to 8 foot tall Sasquatch with a grayish color. They observed it, and it moved with extreme speed once it was sighted. And one of the details that's given is that after the creature left the area, they attempted to retrace the route that the Bigfoot had taken. And they said it took it a matter of seconds, under a minute, to go from where they saw it to out of their vision. And when they tried to do the same thing along approximately the same trail, it took them 6 minutes to do the same thing, suggesting just an incredible ability to move through that terrain. When the 11-year-old daughter was independently interviewed about her sighting, the one physical feature she focused on was the fact that it had the musculature of a large football player, but stronger, and that the arms were at least down to the knees and maybe longer. So that report really is memorable because you have sort of the father-daughter connection, both of them keeping their cool, relatively speaking, under the pressure of seeing something, to the degree that they would kind of conduct their own investigation after the fact. But it was just a daytime sighting. They both know exactly what they saw in an area of Indiana that I think has a history of sighting reports.
Wood knocks. Do you know crows can mimic a wood knock? Yeah, there's video. There's actually video on YouTube. You can look it up. They will make a knock. It sounds, clear like a wood knock out in the woods. Crows are really intelligent, and they remember you. They hold grudges, so don't mess one up. But yeah, they'll make wood knocks. They'll also foxes. We got foxes here. Foxes will make a sound. They'll scream, and one of them, I think the red fox, will sound like a woman screaming, and the gray fox almost at certain times, I think it's during mating season, will sound like like the Ohio howl. But you can distinguish. It's real high pitched, but they'll do the same howl. So you need to listen to these howls these foxes make. You need to listen to your birds.
What's the wildlife here? What wildlife do you guys have in Indiana?
We have the deer and all of that.
Rabbits, squirrels.
Rabbits. We have bobcats.
We have mountain lions.
We do have mountain lions. DNR completely won't admit it, but we do have mountain lions. And now the bear every once in a while there is reports of bear clear up into this area here.
Yeah.
That they're finally saying, yeah, they just confirmed. I heard not too long ago they confirmed a bear track in this area right around here, somewhere here in Brown County.
And now I've heard we have armadillos.
Yeah, and armadillos will come.
That happened.
Yeah, now that we're getting armadillos. But other than that, it's just the main. But the only thing around here that's really out there is the big cats. And I think there's enough food around here that they're not a threat. There's nothing really around here that's a threat if you're out in the woods. Besides, we do have copperheads and rattlesnakes, and this Brown County is known for rattlesnakes.
Yeah, as far as the topography, geography of the state of Indiana and the flora and fauna are concerned, you can really divide the state into 3 sections. The northern part of the state is a lot of farmland and a lot of small cities. In fact, the second largest city in Indiana's Fort Wayne, and that's on the northern part. That's farmland broken up by the occasional stand of trees, but nothing forest-like per se. The central part of the state, Indianapolis sort of dominates that, as well as farmland. It's the southern third where you get into like your Brown County and Hoosier National Forest, where it's rolling foothills, heavily forested, plenty of streams and rivers and tributaries going down to the Ohio River. And the flora and fauna that matches up with that, where you have hardwood trees, deer, the occasional bear, but all the small animals that you would attribute to any Midwestern forest, plenty of fish, just that kind of rugged, rolling terrain that a lot of the Midwestern states host in their southern part.
So this is how close this tracks were to each other. So that's why we think of as a mother and a juvie, because look how close they are. Like the juvie is staying right by her side, or that could be considered a baby for all we know. We found also by here, about 6 foot up on a twig that was broken, a clump of hair. And right below it looked like something had been sitting. And we had the hair sent off through a little private resource that we have. The DNA on that came back human and dog, which is odd because this is so remote. Now, how would a clump of dog and human hair end up on a little broken twig 3 miles in the middle of nowhere? It just was odd. So I'm also going to have it tested through another source that's coming to look at it. So I hope to get a better opinion on that. But you know, when you find something like this in the middle of nowhere, you know it's not a person walking around barefoot with their child. So I don't know, it's very bizarre. So that's the story on those. And this is all in that little 3 mile area that we're talking about.
Indiana may not be the first place one associates with the Sasquatch phenomenon, but this does nothing to diminish its importance in the overall search. Numerous dedicated researchers receive regular and credible reports in the region known as the Crossroads of America, strongly indicating that witnesses are, at the very least, having unexplainable encounters with something amidst the long highways and rich farmlands. In March of 1998, a witness backpacking along the horse trails in Brown County would have an up-close encounter with, according to his description, a bipedal primate. After setting up camp for the night, he heard something moving in the brush inside of a ravine near his campsite, and upon investigating, saw a 7-foot-tall creature that he was sure was not a human being. It was leaning out of the brush, giving him a full view of the figure's head and upper torso.
Who is actively researching the area?
I mentioned IBRO, which they do campouts and kind of sit around the fire and have experiences. That's one of the things I found hard as I've started, because I go to Kentucky a lot just because of the more volume of places to go and people I've met that are active in Kentucky. But I found a hard time finding individuals, you know, that are working in Indiana. I think that's just a lot has to do with the low volume of reports that are out there.
Well, the Indiana Bigfoot Research Organization actually does Indiana. When I'm called in, because my reputation, I guess, they call me. But I'm not putting it out there online of what I'm finding. I put everything in notes. People are welcome to look at my notes. But as far as putting it on social media, I ain't gonna do that. I ain't gonna contaminate an area because of a sighting or my research. I can't.
Who is actively researching this area?
Indiana Bigfoot Research Organization.
Yeah, our organization is active. We have someone out. There's someone in our group that's out every weekend, all the time.
Or every 2 or 3 days. I mean, we're out a lot.
But there is a number of people that's out. I mean, if you go out, while we're out, we're watching around, and we see a number of people, and we know that that's what they're doing.
Well, and we get, when he gets reports, we have people in our organization throughout Indiana, and if it's someplace that's more remote from where we're currently at, he'll contact them and say, can you go check this out?
Can you go check
Because we know, we call them core members, but it's because we know them. We know they're going to respect the property owner and, not disclose where they're going and all that stuff. And if it warrants more research, then we'll go out.
But there's a number of people that actually do research in Indiana. Even Tom Shay out of Kentucky comes up here.
Yeah.
There's other researchers that come up into Indiana and research, but I don't know really of any good size other group besides us that's actually going out and doing research.
The 1970s were a time of intense interest in the Sasquatch phenomenon, and Indiana would be the stage of at least one fairly high-profile encounter story. In November of that year, reports would begin to pop up in and around Mill Race Park in Columbus, Indiana, describing a frightening and somewhat bizarre creature. The hallmarks of many Sasquatch reports were there: 6 to 7 feet tall, ape-like, covered in dark hair, but it was the creature's face that stands out the most. It was described as being green in color. In its first appearance, it would allegedly leap onto the hood of a car, leaving long claw marks scratched into the vehicle's paint. The Mill Race Monster, as it came to be called, would make multiple appearances, kicking off weeks of hysteria amongst locals and prompting several armed groups to set off in search of it. A local newspaper would finally publish an editorial urging the public to remain calm, and the sightings petered off after about 3 weeks. Many believe the Mill Race Monster to be a hoax, but it makes one thing very clear. The thought of Bigfoot has long had a home in Indiana. Going back to the middle of the 20th century, one also finds the Crosley monster on the list of Indiana's strangest residents. Spotted in the Crosley Fish and Wildlife Area in Jennings County, rumors claim that the earliest sightings occurred in 1950, but the creature would gain an increase in popularity in the early 2000s. In 2006, a group of 4 teenage boys would report being chased from the area by a humanoid creature with glowing red eyes. This frightening modern appearance has led many to question if the creature spotted in the 1950s is the same one, a relative or descendant, or perhaps indicates a concentration of Sasquatch-like entities within the state, as further and ongoing reports would seem to indicate.
Marble Hill actually started in 1960. In 1962, right across the river in Trimble County, the county was terrorized. For several months, we had people seeing it, looking in windows, robbing gardens, killing livestock. I think it was about August it stopped, and everything died down over there. November, people found footprints in a field over here in Jefferson County. Then turned back around, this thing over here on Marble Hill was chasing people out of the area, when they was walking around in hunters and such, looking in windows and just terrorizing, the same as it did over across the river. What I'm thinking is this creature here is probably the same creature that lives in my county. They're going to crawl back and forth across the river. But, the one over in my county, they called it the Thing. Here they call it the Marble Hill Monster. If you go further north, you got the Crosley Monster, and you got Big Muddy up there, and the Big Greasy Thing up there, Columbus, Indiana. But the Marble Hill Monster, it's still present today. People are still seeing something. over there. As you see, the area is kind of developed over the years. A lot of people don't want to talk about it because they believe it might bring in bad influence. You gotta think, half the country thinks all of us researchers are crazy anyway, so if you promote something here, then they're gonna say, well, it's this tattle spike. So you don't want that. They don't want that. Large, hairy, the reports go from being reddish brown to gray. Height differences. We've had one that estimated at 7 foot. We had one estimated at 8.5. They've seen small ones. They call them monkeys. And when I asked him, okay, describe a monkey, he goes, a monkey like a chimpanzee. So, we think, okay, young. And that's all in that area. And I mean, that area, if some of that area over there around Marble Hill, it's so dense you can't even walk through it. I mean, it's thick. Like I said, like terrorize people. If people be sitting out there drinking or, teens or something like that, then we come up, hit the car, push it, I think there was one instance where it reached in. Somebody said it reached in. They thought it reached in. They could feel it. One of them got chased, was up on the ridge. They got chased up on the edge of the ridge. They actually hid underneath. And this thing was on top of them. And they could hear it breathing. They haven't chased them. They were hiding. They tried to get into a house over there. There's really not much about it, except for what I've run covered. They don't talk about it much here. But, you get some of these older people, and I'm serious, most of them are dying out. And one lady, and this happened in Kentucky, right across the river, she was in a nursing home, and her granddaughter got me. And said, my grandma wants to tell you something. I said, okay. As I walked in and, I'm looking at this nursing home and these people, this is going to be really sketchy, what this woman's going to tell me, I walked in her room and she sat up and she started telling a story. And she was reliving a story. And she was telling it in detail. There was no gaps in it. There was no, and she just told me about this thing that attacked her house. She just had a baby. They lived up on top of the hill. Her husband worked at a factory in town, grew tobacco on this farm. And this thing, in a storm, this thing tried to get in. And they actually barred everything up, the windows and everything. And all he had in there was a small axe, trying to protect his family. And she said, after it was done and over with, the storm was over, they went out, the place was tore up, the big footprint, she goes, I saw this hairy thing through the window. And she goes, it was in my opinion, it was a demon from hell. And that's what she told me. And at the time I said, okay. I said, where did this happen? She goes, I'll tell you where it happened, because I burnt the house down, because my husband wouldn't. And she told me, and I found the place. And it was on property, and I asked the property owner, I said, can I walk up that hill? She said, yeah, go ahead. The old road is grown up. And you can see where the old rock road went up. I went up and I looked around and I found the fireplace. So exactly where she said she burned it down. I was standing in a place where she had said this happened, and I think it was in 1948. Sadly, right after that, a couple of days after that, she had passed. But I mean, she was so alert, she just knew. You could tell she wasn't lying. She was reliving the events. Her breathing would increase. You could tell she was getting kind of panicky at certain times when she's telling this story. It's really something. And these people, they say they're not violent, but anything can be violent. If you're out here and you think these are friendly things, think again. We all wake up thinking we're okay, but something will make us snap.
About the biggest one I can think of is they call it the Crossley creature. Became more famous in, I think it was the early 2000s, like 2006. And that was where 4 boys were out in the woods fishing. Short version is the creature came up and was very aggressive. I don't know if it sounds like it was probably more territorial than anything, shaking trees and grunting and making noise at them. But the thing that got it some prominence and got it some attention was, as the boys started to leave, they said it dropped on all fours and chased after them. So that's what drew a lot of attention to it at the time, and that gave it some prominence, got some national attention. And then one of the 4 boys had another sighting while he was squirrel hunting the next year. But prior to that there's been a creature sightings there since the 70s. People have mentioned seeing things. And the one lady that was mentioned in the 70s, she talked about a younger one, which made it interesting, but that, maybe there at one time there was a family there, or clan of some sort, because the creature through the years later was always full size, big, hairy, bulky. But the one lady from, I want to say it was in 79, she talked about what we would think of as juvenile. So there was some time frame of growth there, per se, that maybe evidences more than one there.
We had a lady that had one around her house. Okay, she called him Bernie, and she'd been experiencing for a long time. And I've been there, and right off of her steps, found prints where he would just right off of her porch, and he would be out. So I asked her one day, I said, Karen, you call him Bernie. How do you know this is a male? She goes, do you remember the day that I told you that he ran in front of my truck that morning? He come across the dam and stood in front of my truck. I went, yeah. And she goes, yeah.
Definitely a male.
He's definitely a male. But that's how close of a visual she had of it.
He messed up her fence that she had for her dog.
Yeah.
And she told him, please don't mess with that fence. That's where my dog is, and I don't want it to get out. He left it alone. He turned her trail cameras around so she couldn't see him.
Yeah, she'd put trail cameras in it, and he would have to squeeze between her fence and a shed, and she put a trail camera right there. So we take and shove that trail camera back into the shed every time.
This took place in 1990, the fall, October, Monroe County, Indiana, near Unionville. There were 2 sisters driving in their car. It was overnight, 2 a.m. As they're driving along, they see something come out of the woods in front of their car, and they slammed on their brakes just in time to avoid hitting a creature that walked directly in front of their car. In fact, the witnesses claim that it brushed the hood of their car with its hand as it walked by. What made this an unusual case was the gait of the creature. They described it as walking sideways across the road, and upon further inspection, it seemed as though it was limping. Perhaps it had been injured, but it was not in a hurry. It was walking very slowly, and it seemed like it had started its route across this road before the car even got there. Looked directly at them through the windshield, but just kept going. And a key feature in this case is that the figure appeared to be relatively short, like under 6 feet, and probably more like 5.5 feet tall, with a reddish-brown cast to its fur or hair. One of the sisters described it as looking like an orangutan originally, but then was shown a picture of what an orangutan looks like, and she said, no, that's not exactly what we saw. It was more the color association, I think, in this case. But there you have, yet again, the strangeness of a road crossing, the unique feature of a potentially injured Bigfoot, and the fact that it was seen at such close range. And that comes out of a part of Indiana that's probably, if this makes sense, the northern part of the southern third of the state. So right where you expect to start seeing a change from largely flat farmland to rolling hills is where this would have taken place. Indiana's legacy of Sasquatch encounters shows no signs of diminishing. Even tracing a few reports through the years leaves an undeniable impression of ongoing, pervasive activity. In 1981, at Tipsaw Lake in Perry County, a couple were planning on enjoying a picnic when they found the common area they hoped to set up in closed for construction. They settled for a spot nearby while their 2 young sons went for a swim in the lake. The witness then observed a large bipedal creature pacing back and forth across an opening in the trees. It observed the children as they played long enough for both parents to get a clear look at it before moving up towards the nearby dam and disappearing into the trees. In June of 1999, on Falling Creek Road near the town of New Pekin, a 13-year-old witness observed an upright creature walking across a field, spanning a distance of 200 yards in under 20 seconds. It had an unpleasant odor, and the witness would later notice large compressed areas in the surrounding brush, as if something had been bedding down. In 2001, another witness was in high school when their encounter occurred near their home at approximately 1:30 a.m. While retrieving an item from their car, they heard a terrifying scream coming from a park that was within the line of sight of their driveway. They saw a large man-like creature running towards the woods and immediately returned inside, frightened by the unexpected and startling encounter. The list goes on. As the historical record presents a wealth of stories and sightings, the modern day continues to accrue additional run-ins with Bigfoot, or at the very least something that looks very much like the images conjured by that term. While the green-faced creature of Mill Race has not resurfaced, there have been plenty of other run-ins with unidentified subjects by frightened and unsuspecting witnesses. Indiana may be rife with rolling fields and a variety of farms, but it also contains enough forests, lakes, and sprawling park areas that any number of secrets may still be waiting to be discovered there. And it would seem, at least where Sasquatch is concerned, that some of them are lurking just out of sight between the storied byways of the Crossroads of America.
The last one I was just telling you about at Morgan Monroe, it sounded almost like it was mimicking our whoop, but quieter. It's a softer whoop. But also in Morgan Monroe, when I was camping one time with my nephew and a couple friends, it was about 3 a.m. I had the loudest whoop I've ever heard in my life. It woke me up from my sleep. I look at my nephew, he's still asleep. I see our campfire's out, so I know nobody's up, and we're in a spot where there's nobody around. And I hear something walk into our camp. And I'm thinking, well, maybe my friend's son's up or something. So I kind of whisper out the tent, "Jacob, are you awake?" I don't get no response. Then I hear it messing with our pans that we had hanging up, because we had cooked steaks earlier and our pans were hanging up, and it started rattling the pans. I don't know if it was licking them or what, but at that point, I'm like really scared. And I'm thinking either a person or a Bigfoot, and there's no flashlights or headlights, so ain't nobody walking around in the dark and being able to locate all of our stuff. So next morning I get up and I asked my buddy, I said, "Did you hear anything last night?" He goes, "I heard our pans rattling, but I thought it was just an animal." And he didn't even think nothing about it. But it's probably spent about 15 minutes in our camp, and then I heard it walk off, and it was two-legged. I could tell it wasn't like a four-legged animal. So that was the loudest one I've ever heard in my life. So I've heard a lot of whoops. I've never heard any screams, or I have heard chatter. I heard that out at the Putnam County one. I heard chatter. I thought it almost sounded like gibberish, and I expected to walk around the corner and see people, but there was nobody there. That's when I got the chills. I was like, uh-oh.
What happened on that night before you heard the chatter?
I was out hiking at my hot spot, and there's 2 sections to this park. You have to cross over the road to get to the other section. And normally I don't ever go over there. Well, as the time I decided to go there, I was just going down the hill and I heard the chatter, and I was like, oh, I'm going to encounter somebody, and there was nobody there. So that was pretty scary. So I got the chills, and I'm like, uh-oh. Spidey sensors are going off, you better listen. So I'm telling you, Indiana is an underrated hotspot. We think it's more curiosity than anything else. You know, like my friend Greg will say, like when they're camping, those things will get on all fours and come within maybe 30 feet of the camp, but they'll never come any closer. So it's out of curiosity. I don't think they are looking to steal you and take you home to their family, you know? And we've never had any reports of any violent attacks by Bigfoot.
It's okay. Are there cycles to sightings, like certain times of the
All year round, and daytime, nighttime. Doesn't have to be nighttime.
So anytime?
Anytime at all. That's why a lot of people go to the conventions, is because it's like-minded people, and you're gonna find like-minded stories. You're gonna find people who are at least curious about knowing the truth. And we're not in this for fame or money. We just want to learn more about Bigfoot, and if there's any way we can like help to protect them. Because we really don't want a bunch of people out in the woods looking for them, because that's the worst thing that could ever happen for a Bigfoot. Get a whole bunch of crazies in the woods with guns. And we are finding things, but it's very remote. And then when we find an area that's a hot spot, we can go there and we'll have activity every time we go. And we cast tracks, and we get all my castings, sounds have all been from a 3-mile area. So it's got to be their territory. Now, whether they stay there all the time, I don't know. Do we get action every time we go? No. But when we do, it's good. And it does scare you. At least it does me. So, once again, Morgan Monroe. I'm hiking. I'm all by myself, which is probably stupid, but I do. And I'm filming a tree structure. And I hear, I got it on audio, I hear the loudest, like a bellow, a man's bellow. It was like a, ugh, really loud. And I was like, oh crap, it doesn't like me doing this. So I said, sorry, and I'm on my way. And my phone's only got like 10% battery left. I'm thinking, I'm gonna die. But it was watching me, and it let me know it didn't like me filming this tree structure, because it had taken a tree about like this and pulled it out of the ground and wedged it into another tree. So it's like a storm couldn't have picked it up and done what it did. And it was a real weird looking structure, but it was watching me from up on the hill. And I didn't really care for that too well. But it scared me. All the forestries all have campgrounds. So we have another friend who camps a lot in Morgan Monroe. He's from Florida, and he stays in, it's called Scout Ridge. So it's a little bit more way back in the woods. And he's had so many reports of tree breaks and all kinds of activity every time matter of fact, that he wants to keep coming back and staying there because there's just so much activity. So for some reason they like that area. I don't know if it's food, I don't know, but he's had a lot of activity there. So I'm gonna say at Morgan Monroe, we know there's at least a family, because my castings are a juvenile, a bigger one that looks maybe like a mom, and then we've cast like a bigger one, so we think there's at least a family group.